Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephen Jackson. I'm a freshman here at the University of Notre Dame. I'd like to talk to you this afternoon for a few moments about classical music, which I've called a hidden treasure. And unfortunately, I think we can also say it's a bit of a forgotten treasure nowadays. I'm personally very interested in music. I can play several instruments, and I've always just liked listening to music. I think when people hear the words classical music, perhaps what comes to mind, first of all, are the three greatest composers perhaps of all time. So Bach, Mozart, and Beethoven. I'd like to focus on one of these composers, Mozart, and talk a little bit about some research that has been done regarding the link between his music and the brain. So the pioneer of neurological studies of Mozart was a Frenchman by the name of Dr. Alfred Tomati. He was a graduate of the Paris School of Medicine. In the 1960s, he started doing research into the link between the music in general, and especially Mozart, and brain functions. And he found that the music of Mozart had a positive effect on certain brain functions. And this research paved the way later on for further research between this link between neuroscience and music. So later on, 30 years later, at the University of California, some researchers performed an experiment which gave the results of the experiment gave the name to the quote-unquote Mozart effect. And the Mozart effect, so the experiment, the researchers took a group of 30 college students, divided them up into three groups. The first group, and then they were all given a spatial reasoning test. So they had to fold a piece of paper in a certain way, in a certain amount of time. But before doing that spatial reasoning test, for 10 minutes, each of the groups listened to music or were in silence. The first group listened to Mozart, a certain piano sonata, number 448. The second group listened to some minimalist relaxation modern music, and the third group really remained in silence. At the end of the 10 minutes, each of the groups had to go perform their spatial reasoning test. And the scores of the spatial reasoning test were converted into IQ points, and the results showed that the group who had listened to Mozart scored consistently 8 to 9 points higher than the other two groups. So the results of this survey were widespread. Everyone was excited. Yes, Mozart makes you smart. But obviously there were critics. There were critics who said, no, this isn't empirical evidence. It's not a lasting effect. Some people tried to duplicate the experiment and it didn't really work. Some people who remained in silence had better scores. So it kind of left, with these criticisms which actually had some foundation, it kind of left the atmosphere a bit undecided about Mozart. Is it just an imagination? Was it just, was it really scientific fact? So there were further studies that were done, this time not so much in an attempt to improve brain functions, but as a healing. So to try to heal the effects of the disease of, in this case, epilepsy. So there are many tests done. I like to focus on a story of one little girl. So there was this 8-year-old girl who had a very severe case of epilepsy. And she would have about, I think, 9 seizures in the course of 4 hours. So that's kind of a lot. I think about that's one seizure every half hour. It's a lot. So the researchers played Mozart, and it wasn't constant. It was just for every hour that she was awake, she listened to Mozart for 10 minutes of every hour. So that means if she was awake 4 hours, she only heard Mozart for 40 minutes. And again, it was the same piano sonata that was used in the previous study at the University of California with the college students. Whereas she would have 9 seizures in the course of 4 hours after this, so after listening to Mozart for 10 minutes of every hour, the second series of 4 hours, she only had one seizure. And the day after, she only had one seizure, but in this case, it was 7 hours. So this is interesting, I think, because it shows not only is it having a profound effect on the little girl who's 8 years old, if you think about that. But it's also lasting. It's not just that you listen for 10 minutes and you can do your folding paper thing really quick and you feel smarter. This is showing an effect of listening to Mozart and a decrease of the symptom of the disease, which is very interesting. So obviously, neuroscience has more to discover. Neuroscientists are discovering more fascinating things every day. But I think we can safely come to the conclusion that listening to classical music and listening to Mozart is good for you. Not only is it good culture, but it can also benefit you. So even if you don't have epilepsy, and I think those of us, I think we're kind of lucky in a certain sense nowadays. Unlucky and lucky. Unlucky in the sense that, how many of us go to listen to chamber orchestras, once a week? I certainly don't. But we're also lucky because we have technology that allows us to listen to music whenever we want, wherever we want. We can hold all the works of the great composers in our palm, so to speak. And technology companies have recognized that fact. And one example of a company that's taken advantage of that is the company TouchPress, and they made an app to. It wasn't for Mozart in this case, but it was at least still for classical music. It was for Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. They made an app where users could interactively listen to the symphony. In other words, they could find out about what movements were playing, and certain. It wasn't just they push play and listen; it was interactive. And this app had a huge success. It wasn't just some little tiny app that only music nerds downloaded. You had 620,000 people that downloaded this app. That's kind of a lot if we think about the major apps. If an app, if it has 1 million, 2 million downloads, that's considered, wow, that's pretty solid. So this is halfway there almost to something that's hugely popular. So I think, so from what we've seen, I think it's kind of an exciting time, so hopefully, neuroscience, hopefully we'll be able to show even more link between, what exactly in Mozart or any classical music has with the brain and brain functions, like why does listening to music have these effects? It's very fascinating, but I think that all of us, we have the opportunity to listen to classical music, to enjoy it, and it can help us in our lives. Thank you very much.